And I'm happy you are you, my friend, and I'm awfully glad that I'm me. I love you for who you are, and friends will always be. We've traveled different paths, my friend, along life's winding journey. Yet I have always been with you, as you have been with me.
Welcome everyone. My name is Rob McAndrews. I'm a resident of Marblehead, professor of social work at Salem State College, and also the president of the board of the Holocaust Center, Boston North, which is located in the Peabody Essex Library. I'm here today with my friend Apo Torosyan, who I have known for many years now through our work at the Holocaust Center. And I will be conducting an interview with Apo concerning his involvement on the issue of the Armenian Genocide. Apo, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert, for giving me this honor. And it's nice knowing you for all these years, and you have done a great job yourself. I was born in Istanbul, Turkey. I'm a son of a Greek mother and an Armenian father, coming from a country that has discriminated both sides, as historically they were both the first Christian nations in history of Christianity. I had a great education in Turkey. I was very fortunate to go to a college, a university that was almost in the same level as Rhode Island School of Design. And it was free because, you know, you had to go through some exams to be accepted, but I was very lucky to be accepted. And I was surrounded with wonderful friends in school with the liberal minds of accepting each other. But you have to realize that was only in the school. Outside of the school, the discrimination was a different story. As I said, my father was Armenian. He was a survivor of the Armenian Genocide. He was 5 years old when he experienced the hunger, the thirst, the starvation, and the loss of the family. With my ancestor, well, mostly were starved to death, not massacred, but that was a more cruel way than dying by a bullet. And that includes my mother too, and her side, she had her share, and she was a survivor with only a mother. So basically, in my family, the only grandparent I have was only one, and that was my mother's mother. The rest of the grandparents were killed or starved to death.
We'll be focusing more on your more recent films, The Mogador Story and Voices, which is a film that focuses on the lives of Armenian survivors today. But I noticed that you actually have a work going back called the Bread series in 1999. Was that your first work?
Well, my first work goes way before that.
Okay.
I had 400 canvases before I went to college. All right, so my professor says either you start all over, forget everything, or just go on your own. And I choose to go. When I came to the United States, I had my own business. I had a visual design company. And so I had to give up my art to be successful in my business, and I was.
Right.
And when I sold my business in '86, I dedicated my life back to my art. And after a long time of experimental, we call it experimental, to get into a style or a statement that you want, I started with the conceptual art. It was called the Bread series, and called Immigration Installation, which was a combination of third dimension, including fourth dimension, which included the visitors became part of the exhibit.
On your website, do you have samples of your work?
Yes, I do. I have several websites, and one of them is University of the Minnesota. There is a section of my artwork in that department. actually. University of Minnesota had a great contribution. Late director Steve Feinstein got me into the IAGS, International Association of Genocide Scholars.
Genocide Scholars.
From my installations, which the last one was, one of them was at the Holocaust Museum, I was, before that, the intriguing part was a few people that had, you know, and I know, that got us together. Their name is Sheldon Brown and Sonia Weitz. They are the one that got me into to speak about the Armenian Genocide.
I see.
I didn't speak about the Armenian Genocide because I knew that would get me in trouble if I wanted to visit my country that I was born, which is Turkey.
Yeah.
When Sheldon Brown asked me to have a presentation about the Armenian Genocide, I said, you know, I'm a visual person. I cannot just talk, which is abstract.
Right.
I have to have something concrete. So I ended up going to my father's village and undercover and interview the children of the perpetrators, including did find my father's village, my father's house, and so on. So it was a very emotional and fearful experience.
And so that was spurred on by your contact with Professor Sheldon Brown.
That's
and
correct.
Then the Holocaust survivor and co-founder of the Holocaust Center, Sonia Weitz. You formed a friendship with Sonia. In what way
Yes.
did Sonia influence your
Sonia was just another survivor that I met. When I met her, you know, I just cried with her stories, and my story were so similar. And so we became just admirers of each other.
I see. Can you say just a little bit more about the metaphor of bread for you as an artist, and connecting that with your work concerning the Armenian genocide?
Well, the bread itself was a weapon. Even though it's a nutrition that we all survive with, especially in the poor countries, it was taken away from the people, including my father. I mean, I'll give you one example of, this is from my family memoirs that my uncle wrote. He was 17 years old in that time. He's jailed in Aleppo, and he's going to be killed. You know, if you're Armenian, your sentence is death. As Churchill said, all you have to just be an Armenian, then your sentence is death, he said in 1915. So my uncle was in jail, and my father was sleeping on the sidewalk, talking to him through the window on the sidewalk. So that's the only person he has alive. Yeah. And the next morning, they tie him up, and he's following the soldier to the destination they're going to go.
Right.
And my father starts crying. My uncle says, "Why are you crying?" My father is 5 years old. You have to realize, if 5 years old says, "I don't have bread to give you," that's how mature death made them. If you look at the survivors, if you look at those children's faces, they're not 5 years old. They're 85 years old. They have the experience of death. They have seen death. So bread is a metaphor which symbolizes death and life.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Some background history about Armenia.
Armenians is a very old tribe, historically. Anatolia, which is a Greek name, by the way, means the land of the sun, Anatolia, which is Turkey today, originally was shared by Greeks, Armenians, Assyrians. And those tribes were the first Christians, but before Christianity, they were there. Armenians' history goes a little bit around 4,000 years from our time. So that means 2,000 years BC. And recently they did find a shoe. I don't know, you heard about it.
I did. 5,500 years old?
Isn't that something? Yeah. Well, Armenians were known for being shoemakers, but I didn't know that they did go that far.
It'd be very tempting discuss that in length, but maybe
Yes.
another program.
Yes. So, Armenians were mountain people. They were rough and tough. You know, they were not coming from a very comfortable land, but somehow they survived. And they went through an incredible amount of invasions. From the east, from the west, from the south, from the north. Historically, they have been invaded so many times. But something kept them alive. And I think it was the culture. First, it was their traditional culture, which we know not enough about it.
Yeah.
But with Christianity, that became the pillar of their survival.
Right.
No matter how much they were oppressed by the Mongols, by the Turks, by the Persians, by the Greeks, they survived somehow because of the church.
Right.
That was their survival. And up to now, the Armenians are a very religious group of people.
The modern language of Armenia that's spoken today, how far back could we go and really see that the language structurally has not changed very much? Can we go all the way back to where Christianity was born
Before
in Armenia?
Christianity.
Even before Christianity?
Yes, that language, which is a Hindu-European language background, existed long before Christianity, with different dialects, of course, depending on the location. But they did not have an alphabet until 400 years after Christ.
Okay.
So what they did, they used the Greek alphabet in Armenian,
Sure.
in Armenian writing.
Sure. Armenia today is bordered by which countries?
Georgia, Turkey, Persia, and Russia. And it's a landlocked, so
Right.
they don't have water to get to from the
And
transportation.
approximately how many people live in the country of Armenia?
Approximately 2 million.
2 million.
They are financially and economically in a difficult situation. They get a lot of help from outside, but because they are landlocked and their economy is struggles because Turkey blocked their borders. Of course, Azerbaijan is another country which has blocked because they had a war between. Russia is the main ally to help Armenians' survival.
And a trading partner?
A trading partner.
Yeah.
Persia partially of that trading partner too. So Armenia had their independence since 1991, so it's a fresh new country, struggling but still very successful.
Right.
For as you know, after the Russian regime, you know, which everybody dependent on the government income, everything has changed now. It's free enterprise, so
Yeah.
the smart ones and the successful ones are doing okay, but the ones that they live the old-fashioned, they're not doing okay.
Now, going back to history a little bit before we work our way toward the events surrounding the Armenian Genocide, going back to the 19th century, what are the important facts of that history that would help us understand, setting the stage, setting the seed, so to speak, for the genocide that happened?
Yes. Well, to begin with, I like to go back to the time when the Turks start taking over Anatolia. When Anatolia was taken over by the Turks, Anatolia was speaking Greek. They were not speaking Turkish. And the eastern part of Anatolia was Armenia. So they were speaking Armenians.
Armenian.
They had two separate kingdoms.
Okay.
It was quite a different environment in that time. They were nomads. They didn't know how to cultivate the land. They learned from the natives to cultivate the land. And the natives, of course, was used as labor of slaves.
Free labor.
They were just forced. Now, by the 19th century, or before 19th century, the minorities were discriminated by the Ottomans. The Ottoman government was a Muslim government, and because the minorities were Christian and Jews, they were second-class citizens.
Yeah.
And they still are.
Yeah.
And because of that, they were discriminated in severely. For example, they had clothing restrictions. If you were Armenian, you got to wear a red belt, a red hat. You got to wear red color. If you are a Jew, you got to wear blue. If you are a Greek, you got to wear black. Those were a sample of restrictions. Another restriction, minorities. I'm talking about Greeks, Armenians, Jews, Christians, and Jewish minorities. They were not allowed to wear a sword. They were not allowed to have a house that would be higher than a Turkish house in the village. They were supposed to give the way to the Muslim Turk walking if it's on the path, and so on.
And these policies throughout the 19th century were actually part of the law of the Ottoman Empire. It was imposed legally upon the Armenians and Jews and Greeks?
The law was not in writing. It was more
practice.
Of an oral practice.
This is a practice.
And it was not as bad as what I was talking about in the 19th century. Because by the 19th century, things start happening. And one of the things were minorities were demonstrating against this oppression. And the leader of foreign leaders, especially Russia, was very much into the protection of the minorities.
I see.
Because Armenians and Greeks, they were both Orthodox Christians.
Right.
And Russians were Orthodox Christians. So right there was a connection.
Commonality.
And because of that, there were 3 wars. Russia had attacked the Ottoman Empire 3 times. By the 3rd time, they were very close to Istanbul. They were a distance away, and they were driven back with money. So the capitulations is called in French, was the rights, the minority rights were disliked by the Turks because they gave them too much human rights.
Interesting. So what you're laying out is that religion played a role in kind of transcending some of the ethnic differences among the minorities, and that when there were demonstrations against Ottoman practices of discrimination, many of these minority groups actually came together?
They had small demonstrations. Could be a newspaper article. Could be 5-10 people saying, we're not going to pay our taxes. That became a revolt. And they killed thousands. Not only that, that was the beginning of the Armenian Genocide, because the first Armenian Genocide, actually it happened between 1894 to 1896. Over 200,000 Armenians were killed indiscriminately in Anatolia, including the city of Istanbul, which was Constantinople in that time.
Now, I think that's going to come as a surprise to many people to learn that prior to the genocide of World War I, which we're looking at 1915 predominantly?
1915, yes.
That prior to that, some 20, 30 years prior to that, there was a wholesale slaughter of, you said, around 200,000?
200,000. And that's only Armenians.
Just Armenians?
Greeks were too.
Yes.
Assyrians were too.
Right.
Including Jews.
Right.
So there was, the name of the Sultan was Abdul Hamid. And he was called as the Red Sultan because his hand was bloodthirst.
I understand.
He was known as the Red Sultan.
Could you now bring us closer to the actual events of 1915?
All right.
of World War One.
As you see, the killing was a practice by the Ottomans. It was indiscriminately killing was a practice, and they did it in any way they had a chance. They were not educated. The only thing they believed is their sword, and there's a Turkish saying for that. I'll say it in Turkish. Anybody's listening in Turkish, they'll know what I mean.
Okay.
Kılıcımın kanıyla, with the blood of my sword. That's the pride that the Turks had from their history.
You're directing your comments to the fact that these policies were intentional policies on the part of the Ottoman leadership at the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And there's historical documentation supporting this assertion that this was an intentional policy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I have lists and lists of killings from Greeks to Armenians and to other minorities. It is mind-boggling. And the Turks themselves, the ones that are educated, they are ashamed themselves. You know, I'm not talking about the fanatics.
The events of the early years of World War I, leading to the actual genocide, which took place over how much of a period of time? Are we talking about a 1 year, a year and a half period?
Originally, in the 20th century, the first Armenian genocide was in Kilikia. That's the southern part of Turkey, today Adana,
okay.
In 1909.
And there was an Armenian community living there?
It was an Armenian kingdom in history.
Okay, okay.
It was an Armenian kingdom, and they were part of the Crusaders.
Okay.
The Crusaders stopped by before they went to
and the
Middle
year
East.
was
1909.
1909.
1908, the Young Turks took over, supposedly with the liberal views. Armenians.
So this expression, Young Turks, we know from history. What does that term really mean?
The Young Turks were a group of Turks activists. Their headquarters was in Salonika, in Greece. They established their group over there. Mostly they were from Europe, from Bulgaria, Romania, and so on. And they established their existence in Salonika with hopes that they will revolt against the Sultan. This was the facade.
Okay, okay.
Using the Sultan that was killing so many people.
Right.
And they wanted to be the liberators
okay.
of the Ottoman Empire. They were French-speaking, they were educated in France, so they knew the French Revolution.
But their commonality was a combination, it seems you're saying, of a political ideology together with their ethnic identity?
It was not an ethnic identity, but they believed that Turkey should be for Turks only. That idea grew by 1910, 1911, because by 1912 they had the Balkan War. When the Balkan War happened, they lost a huge territory of the Ottoman Empire. The Balkan lands were gone. The northern part of Africa was gone. So Turkey, Ottoman Empire, shrunk to today's Turkey, almost to that. And they had the fear that the Armenians will be another problem. In reality, Armenians and them, they were together. The intellectuals, had the same idea to Turkify Turkey with modern ideas. to equal ideas.
Right.
And everybody should be a citizen, not a second-class citizen.
Right.
And the Armenians and the Turks, those young Turks, were very close friends with each other.
So the Young Turks then were successful in overthrowing
Yes,
the
they
old
were.
regime?
Yes, they did.
Yep.
They did.
And this led then, was this an immediate proximate precursor to World War I?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when the World War I started, with the provocation of the Germans, because Germans were very close friends with the Turks through 19th century. The Germans provoked the Turks to get into the war. Actually, it was a ploy. It happened in Black Sea. They had 2 cruisers that they donated to the Turkish government right before World War I. They changed their outfits to Turkish outfits. They put a Turkish flag and bombarded the Russian port. And that's how Turkey got into the war. And after that, they were advising the Turkish government how to get rid of the Armenians.
Okay.
The word vermin was used by Germans, vermin,
Yep.
to the Armenians. And we all know the same word was used during World War II to
Apply to the Jews.
apply to the Jews. Exactly. It was the same generals that worked in the German government later on with Hitler. This is how it starts. In April 24, 1915 is the historical date that they gather 250 intellectuals, parliament members, after the war had already started.
Right.
So thinking that the whole world is busy with the wars,
Right.
they're not going to look into this, and it's a good time to get rid of those Armenians, the minorities. So first they collected the men in all over Anatolia. They said, it's wartime, we're going to take you to military service. They took them out of the villages. That includes my own uncle. He was driven out by the Turkish military. They were giving them shovels to dig a ditch, saying that we're going to make a road. Then they start shooting them one by one. When my uncle's turn came, the rifle misfired. So he turned his head to see what was going on. And the rifle fired. The bullet went through his ear. He threw himself into the ditch. He stayed there for 3 days and 3 nights without moving. That's how he survived. That's how we know the story. I met him. I saw the bullet hole in his ear. Yes.
The pretext was we're rounding up the men for military service and for general service to the country, building roads, building bridges, whatever. But you're saying that immediately
Kill them.
The massacres.
Kill them, so this way there was no protection. The Armenians couldn't protect themselves. So the rest, what was left, the elderly, women, and children. The only people that protected themselves was in the east. They knew what was coming. They were aware of it.
Okay.
So they armed themselves.
For resistance.
They resisted.
Right.
They resisted to the Turks.
I see.
And they survived. Of course, there was a war with the Russians. And in one part, here's another excuse for killing Armenians. One of those Turkish leaders, his name was Enver Pasha, he had 80 or 100,000 military with him attacking in Georgia to the Russians in the middle of the winter.
Yeah.
He messed it up. His entire military froze to death.
Wow.
Okay. There was a few...
And this was somehow blamed on Armenians?
Because a few thousand, could be 1,000, could be 500 Armenians switch side to the Russian army. And that was a good excuse to say, there are the traitors, kill all Armenians. The rest of the country, including my own family, were not involved into anything like that.
Was this also in the spring of 1915?
1914.
1914.
This happened in 1914.
So all right, so an earlier pretext for wiping out this population, that they're perceived as traitors.
Yes. His brother-in-law was the leader in charge to kill all the Armenians in the east.
I see.
And so on the city of Van, which is a city that has been in Armenian occupation and civilization for 4,000 years, protected themselves, defeated the Turkish military. The Turkish military couldn't penetrate, and then when the Russians pulled out because of 1917 revolution, they had to run with them. Whoever left behind were killed.
So going back to the populations that were being forced, intentional policy, removing the women and the children, were they then forced to march from one place to another? Tell me about this. Were people, the women and children, did they starve to death? Were they actually, most of them, shot?
Yes. Here's the story comes up because at the end of this program, we're going to see the short version of Voices.
Voices.
Which will see 3 witnesses of that period. 3 witnesses. The oldest one is almost 107 years old. And they are talking about...
You interviewed...
I interviewed...
a survivor who was 107 years old.
Yes.
And you interviewed her how long ago?
The film was finished in 2007.
So just a few years ago.
I interviewed her. Yeah, she lived in Andover, North Andover.
Wow.
Yeah, Boston Globe had an article about her life.
Wow.
She was a fascinating lady, well educated. She talks about how her mother died because she couldn't drink a glass of water. Or the other elderly gentleman, he talks about his grandfather, that he was beheaded. Those are the truth. So what happened was a very cowardly way to kill. Very cowardly way. What the Turkish government did in that time was with a pretend, saying that you have to go to far away from here because we're in a war, we don't want you up front, you have to go farther away into the east. And in reality, the east was the border. But it was a...
So the pretense sounds as if they're doing this,
protecting
protection.
The public. Yes, they lied. There's so different ways of lies. Every different village or town had a different lie. Some of them were forced. Some of them were just lied. And what was left was women, children, and elderly. And on their way, they were raped. They were killed. They were massacred. They were cut into pieces. So it was a cruel way to kill innocent people. These were women and children and elderly. They couldn't protect themselves. A 5-year-old child, a 3-year-old child. My cousin was 6 months old, was thrown into the air, was caught with a sword. I mean, what kind of a skill is that?
The accounts that we have from history come from survivors of these massacres who provided memoirs of their experiences.
Yes.
And what other...
eyewitnesses.
And eyewitnesses, I was going to say.
I have it in my film, those eyewitnesses.
Right. People who were not Armenian, who were also eyewitnesses?
Yes.
Right.
And they were killed too.
Yeah.
They were killed too. There was Armenian teachers in the Far East of Turkey. They were witnesses. There was a doctor, somebody. There's so many names right now. The books.
Apo, I don't have to tell you that there are some, fortunately a very small minority, not only in Turkey but perhaps even here in the United States, around the world, who say that they're historians and that they do not find evidence of genocide in Armenia.
Well, I'll tell you what's behind that. Money. The Turkish government spends $50 million a year with your tax money. We pay that money to Turkey every year. They spend $50 million a year to provide that kind of a publicity. If I went into the list of what I have, that includes lobbyists in our own government. I'll give you one example that all of us know. He used to be a leader of the Democratic Party, Gebhardt. He gets $100,000 a month from the Turkish government. And he was on the sides of the Armenians. He switched sides because of the money.
Maybe this is a good time to help us understand where the origins of this concept genocide comes from.
The Young Turks, there were three leaders: Talat Pasha, Enver Pasha, Cemal Pasha. Talat Pasha was the main instigator of this planning. He was the main planner. Originally, he was a mailman. From Bulgaria, I believe. He established the group in Salonika, 1906. Then the planning went on and on and on. I'll give you one example. Was very few governments around the world that they have a war, and at the end of the war, they have a surplus. Turkey did. Turkey's financial situation was better and better and better. Now this man, which was one of the leaders, at the end of the World War I, 1918, he burned all the evidences, all his, mostly it was oral, his orders were killing his oral, but he had some telegrams. He burned all the evidences in Istanbul, in Bosphorus, in a mansion, which belonged to one of those Armenians, and then he was smuggled out of the country with a German submarine. He settled in Berlin at the end of the war with 10 million marks. Now, in those days, 10 million marks could buy a town. Where this one was a mailman. Where did he get all that money? Who paid him? So that was the victims' money. By the way, the victims were not only Armenians, were Greeks and Assyrians. The total figure was 2.5 million. 1.5 million of that was Armenians. The other 1 million was Greeks and Assyrians. He's living in Berlin. Now we go back to the during of genocide. This man we're talking about, his name was Tehlerian. Young man in the east part of Turkey. And him and his family are massacred, except him. In front of his eyes, everybody is killed. His brother is killed, and he's laying on top of him. And he is wounded, and he's bleeding, but they don't know that he's alive. That's how he survived. So that's how he escaped. He was saved by Kurds, which Kurds, in reality, not all Kurds were bad. There were good Kurds that they saved a lot of Armenians. And Turks, too. I'm not saying all Turks were murderers. And so he was saved. Then he did go to Europe, to Berlin, and he followed this Talat Pasha. His friend, which was another young Turk, had a tobacco shop, so he would go to the tobacco shop every other day to get his tobacco. So he followed his routine. Finally, he tapped on his shoulder, pulled his revolver, and killed him between his eyes. And he says, "This is for my family." Revenge. He was right away arrested. The court case was a sensation. Everybody, all the press, everybody was in that courtroom, and witnesses came. A lot of witnesses came, and they spoke of what happened about the Armenian Genocide.
Okay.
And he was freed. There was one young man in that crowd that he was very much interested into this human rights, international politics, social politics. And he was going in school in that time and studying that. And his name was Raphael Lemkin. And that trial made him, that's his own words. I mean, we have it on television.
Yes.
He says himself on television live.
Yes.
He says that that trial made him to create the words genocide.
And Raphael Lemkin at that time was he a teenager? Was he
College student.
college student?
Yes, yes.
Because we know his story
Yes.
later.
He's going to
emigrates
school
the
in
United
Hamburg
States,
in that time.
and he was
A
very
Polish
influential.
Jew, which his entire family was destroyed, as you know, by the World War II. But he's there, and he's following this trial, and he created the word genocide. Comes from two origins. Genos, in Greek, means race. Side or side means killing.
Yeah.
So it's race killing,
Race
which
killing.
is the perfect word.
Right.
And guess what? When that word was recognized by United Nations by 1948,
In the convention, right?
one of the first governments around the world who signed to recognize that word was Turkey. Isn't that a joke?
And one of the last was the United States.
Yeah.
Could you provide us with a little bit of an introduction now to your documentary film, Voices?
I'd like to say one last word for this program. I believe in one thing, which is hope, not hate. As a human beings, we have created enough excuses to kill each other. I hope someday we're going to learn not to do that.
Right. Thank you. I hope so.
Voices, like I said before, it's about 3 survivors. It's a sad story, but it's a real one. As Buddha said, truth overcomes lies, but it takes centuries to find out. Thank you.
Thank you, Apo, very, very much.
With the defeat of the Balkan Wars in 1912, the Ottoman Empire turned its attention to the Armenian question. Loss of territory was the government's main concern. A large population of Armenians, which had their ancestry of almost 4,000 years in the plateau of Anatolia, today's modern Turkey, was an obstacle for the young Turks' planned regime. Greeks and Assyrians in the area were the same target. The Turkish goal was Turkey for Turks only. Under the leadership of Talat Pasha, Enver Pasha, and Cemal Pasha, the government decided to eliminate this minority, second-class Ottoman citizens. It started on April 24th, 1915, with the killings of over 200 Armenian intellectuals, members of the parliament, leaders of the society. By 1922, the end result was the death of a total of 2.5 million innocent civilians. 1.5 million of that figure was Armenians, and the remaining 1 million was Greeks and Assyrians. This was the first genocide of the 20th century. The Turkish government still has not officially recognized this crime against humanity.
Jesus Immanuel. Im Geratas Morbodes Nahstagir Burbespire by Sapsos for Yerase.
It starts with my father's background. He was an orphan, 1895 massacres in Urfa. His father was killed. He was beheaded. And I met a man who knew about his heart. In his 30s, he was in his 80s from Urfa. When he saw I was a skier from Urfa, he said, this is what happened. I was there when they beheaded your father.
It was 1915. We woke up one morning by the loud voice of the Turkish official's announcement. His title was Münedik. I don't know his title in Armenian or in English. He announced that all Armenians should take whatever we could take with us and leaving the rest of our belongings behind, because we were going to go from Hüseyinik, the town we were in, to Kesrik. Then we would come back to Hüseyinik. That's how they cheated us. They shipped us to Aleppo. On the streets, women and children on their laps, hungry, crying. Mothers sold their children for a loaf of bread so the children would survive.
And so my father and mother, newly married, went down from Antep to Ekizova, Karaduran, and Kirkina, 3 villages. He was minister of all 3 of them, so he was doing a good job, building a church, had the walls up, and they called him from Aleppo. And so they packed up and went to Aleppo. The church was never completed, except I was fortunate enough to be able to finish it myself.
The Turkish neighbor took me only, did not want the rest of my family. On this world, all humanity has its bad ones and good ones. When he took me to his home, he had 2 sons and a daughter, my age. We used to talk Armenian with each other. She and I became close to each other. I was unaware that I was in this household, safe and sound, but out there, my people were being massacred by Turks. They brought us to Father Aharon's orphanage in Aleppo. From 4 of us, 3 died. It was typhus. Even soldiers were dying from typhus. The Turks started gathering selected individual males from the top ranks of the village, like shoemakers, tailors, etc. 40 of them were imprisoned in a home to be killed one by one. Those 40 male Armenians were aware of their destiny. So, after several discussions, they decided to kill themselves with a kerosene flute. Yes, they did burn themselves to death instead of dying with a Turkish bullet.
He picked up 2 children. Dead mother. First went home. My mother tried to feed him, take care of my father, and he couldn't eat to do anything. He started crying. He had to go back and get those 2 children from his dead mother. Bring them home on an E-sharp, full of lice, full of dead, killing lice. And so he brought them home without mother, cleaned them up and fixed them and gave the dinner to him. But the lice on those children got on him. That's what he died from.
My mother used to say that she would sell her hair to educate me. She didn't know how to read and write. She couldn't educate my other 2 sisters. Her all hopes were on me.
Cemal Pasha.
Cemal Pasha was the head commander of Syria and vicinity. He had received orders from Talat Pasha saying to kill all Armenians in Syria.
So then my mother was working for the Red Cross there. They were helpful. They had a truck. They took us to Antep in a truck, and the people never saw a truck there before. That's where we went. But before then, I was put in a German day school. It was the only available school. So I was in there for I don't know how long. But I was 6.5 years old when we went from Aleppo to Antep. In Antep, the Turks were still fighting. Me and my cousins had to go downtown once, and they were shooting at us and chasing us. Another time, our military had to send food to the soldiers in the front. They barricaded the streets that were leading to Armenian camps, Armenian homes, and barricaded the streets so the Turks could not come in. And one of my mother's cousins were killed there. We took food there and came back out 6.5 years old. So the Armenian Antep, the Union of America, gave me a commendation.
Gadim Kara Pasha. Anlıyor mu?
Turkish General Kazım Karabekir, after reconquering the east, conquered Armenia's capital Yerevan. Then Russia and the Allied powers intervened with the decision that all governments were entitled to have their own land. So 9,000 square miles were given back to Armenia. After the war, when Kemal was asked about the Armenian question, his answer was, "We gave 9,000 square miles of land to Armenians. Let it be their graveyard." When I drink, I always remember my mother. The Turks did not give her a glass of water. That's how she died.
Իմ լերացած մորմոդեր նա հստագեր որպես բյուրեղ, բայց ափսոս որ երազ է։
You are you, my friend, and I'm awfully glad that I'm me. I love you for who you are, and friends will always be. We've traveled different paths, my friend, along life's winding journey. Yet I have always been with you as you